Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on the time you tune into this. I'm your host, Imran Abubakar, and I'd like to formally welcome you to the first official episode of the Blue Tapes podcast. The crazy thing is, I actually came up with the idea for this podcast almost a year ago, in the summer of 2019, right about after I graduated from high school. I was feeling quite ambitious, and I was just looking for that next big thing to challenge myself with. I came up with what I thought was a dope name, the Blue Tapes podcast, which I'll actually explain the meaning of in a later episode. Paid an artist to do the artwork for me, bought the domain name so I could possibly build a website later on, yet I never launched this. I spent all this money of mine, yet didn't have the balls to actually bring it to life. The thing is, had it not been for these particular set of circumstances that we're currently in, and where I have an ungodly amount of downtime, simply from having to be at home pretty much the entire day, I would not have been forced to deal with my insecurities and fear of failure. With that being said, we're here nonetheless, and again, welcome. So let's jump straight into the topic. These are strange times we're living in. We're not even through half the year yet have experienced and seen some pretty awful stuff this year, I'd say. Surprise deaths, global pandemics, economic shutdowns, and that doesn't even seem to scratch the surface. As a generation, this is coming from a Gen Z kid, by the way. This is the first time I'd say we've all been tested with something this difficult. Self-quarantining is not an easy feat by any means. Not to discount any of y'all's hardships that you experience individually in your lives, but collectively, this is some next level shit. This is affecting everybody. It's a global issue. To be honest, we were too young to know what the atmosphere of the country was like right after 9/11 and the recession in 2008, which really affected our parents and millennials especially. You come to think of it, and a lot of people from older generations have so many negative things to say about millennials, yet fail to recognize how the recession shifted the trajectory for an entire generation. We were kids when this happened. And unless you were set to inherit some kind of diverse stock portfolio, I'm not sure how it directly affected you per se, but feel free to tell me otherwise, because it might have been very impactful for you and your families. And I do recall there being a lot of foreclosures during, in the country during this period. We are really being tested, man, I tell you. We all have to figure out ways to fulfill our cravings for social interaction. Even for individuals who don't need a whole lot of social interaction and are pretty satisfied with the tiny circle of confidants that you've chosen to associate with, this quarantine leaves a lot to be desired. There isn't anyone beyond the people you live with to compliment you in person. There isn't anyone to laugh at your jokes in person. There isn't anyone to check you on some real shit in person. All of these aspects of social interaction have to be replaced through a screen. And I kind of anticipate there to be a very sharp upward trend in social media addiction beyond what was observed before this pandemic. It's tough, man. It's extremely tough. It's not really something you'd want to do to spend hours on a particular app, because that's the closest thing you have to remedying the loneliness that you might be feeling. I know we all are. And if you don't really have that close circle of people beyond your immediate family that you can just call up and vent to, it's very easy to come to the conclusion that you don't matter at this particular point in time, that no one cares to check up on you. Well, I'm here to lift up your spirits and reassure you that that's probably not the case at all. A lot of people are going through very intense spiritual, mental challenges that require extensive solitude and self-reflection. I know I certainly had to, in terms of figuring out what was harming my self-esteem. And naturally, our minds go to the worst possible place. I'd say human consciousness is a beautiful thing, but it's just one of the consequences of creation. We just go to these places that we don't want to go to, but our minds just take us there anyway. To speak about mental health for just a bit, I plan on dedicating an entire episode on this topic later on and bringing on some folks, to enlighten us with their experiences with this. It needs to be a very real conversation during this pandemic. The effect of self-isolation, let alone social distancing on the human psyche, I can tell you for certain, without any shame, that being in quarantine has affected my mental health in some way. I recall being extremely down, not leaving my room for days except to shower pretty much. I wasn't even eating that much either. I genuinely thought I fell into a depressive episode. It was really difficult to get myself out of. Then after that, I started experiencing very strong feelings of anxiety. What ends up happening is that you start to lose perspective. Your home essentially starts to become your entire world very slowly. Things you probably couldn't care less about before now seem to worry you. Now I get very anxious for some reason whenever I post something on social media. I now seem to fear some imaginary repercussions or feel like there'll be some criticism of what I'm doing. I didn't care about that before at all. You probably didn't as well. But let's get real here because there's more to this in social media. It can affect your attitude towards school, and I know a lot of students are essentially on the vibe of F this. If I couldn't learn properly in school, what makes you think I'm going to be any better at my house? For a lot of people, school is the last thing you want to be dealing with, as the assignments you used to be able to tolerate because you had your friends to talk to and just the general excitement of the school day sometimes now just become unbearable. I completely understand this, as do many others, and I feel like it's absolutely necessary to mention that I truly empathize with the class of 2020 at the high school and collegiate levels. This is probably most difficult on y'all, as I don't know if you'll be able to get the proper send-off that we all know you deserve. If anything, being stuck at home could either kill your motivation to do absolutely anything or trigger you to go on this manic hunt to do something productive. I don't know about you, but sleeping 16 hours a day was a very common occurrence for me for the first 2 weeks. I couldn't get myself to do jack shit. The last thing I had expected to start doing was buy a whole bunch of recording equipment and start a podcast I told myself I was going to host a year ago. But I'm going to be honest. This first episode is going to pale in comparison to the ones that follow. The following episodes are not going to follow this format. I don't want to lecture you. But I do have to say there's a lot of questionable stuff on the internet. Meme culture is something in and of itself. It's pretty insane. But I saw that, just from my own personal observations, that there aren't many areas where young people are coming together and having a conversation about what affects us on a day-to-day basis. Student debt, moral clashes between what religion tells you is permissible, yet attempting to adapt to the progressive attitudes of the Western world, dealing with cultural expectations if you're a child of immigrants, and I don't want to call it hookup culture, but essentially how people are selecting partners and if commitment is something that's still valued today. The current job market that we're set to enter and young entrepreneurship which has been taken to a new level that I'm extremely proud of. It's very encouraging to witness. I don't really see many platforms giving attention to these topics. There's some, but they are far and few in between. We can do our social media activism. We can post something, share a post. But are we actually participating in conversations currently being dominated by older folks? That's not necessarily a bad thing, but they've just been around longer. But are we bringing issues of much concern to people currently in positions of influence? Because essentially we are set to inherit the world. And that doesn't sound as exciting as it should be, because we will also inherit every set of problems that the former generations left behind for us to take care of, and we will, without failure, do the same for the following generations after us. It's not my intention to pop your bubble, but it's probably what needs to happen. I don't even know if we'll be able to afford homes in the next 20 years. Can we really afford to buy them? Nonetheless, this will not be me just stomping on your parade. The purpose of this podcast is to shed light on stories that I personally feel are not being given the attention they deserve. I pride myself on being someone that's kind of well-versed in a lot of areas of thought, ranging from culture, religion, sexuality, morality. Maybe it's because I'm still one of those people that still likes to read. Yes, I still like to read. It's kind of my drug. I know that's probably going to be edited out one day and taken completely out of context, but I don't care. It's whatever. The point is, as much as I think I know, there's still so many things I have no idea about. I still consider myself to be a very ignorant person. So bringing on young folks who have heartfelt stories to share and identities to be recognized, it does a lot in terms of bringing y'all a platform. Does this mean I'm just going to bring on people that I personally identify with? No, not at all. It's imperative that I bring people on that I disagree with as well. To sort of mitigate that, I'm going to be relying heavily on you, the audience, to kind of bring new ideas and issues of concern to the light that we can dive deep in. I have ideas for pretty much the next 4 or 5 episodes. I know what I'm going to talk about, but after that, y'all can get whatever y'all want, essentially. This is probably going to be the shortest episode of the bunch as well, since it's pretty introductory. I'll be following a weekly schedule and where I'll probably release every Sunday around noon, and if it gets to a point where we have an array of topics to touch on, I'll have to be releasing every 3 or 4 days. That would be pretty fun for me, I'd say. I'm pretty much at the end of my script, so I'm just going to start free versing, and at the end of the episode, end the episode with some motivational jargon. I'm pretty sure it's the same for y'all, but 2020 was supposed to be a different kind of year. I had set so many goals for myself this year and told myself I'm going to accomplish X amount of things, but of course the situation takes precedence, and we have to approach our goals in a different manner than we'd like. That's not to say we still shouldn't pursue them, though. The thing is, I'm just starting to understand that how unforeseeable the future can be. You're gonna have to roll with the punches in order to move forward. My parents never let me forget this. When we're in times of prosperity, it really doesn't do anything for us but give us good memories to look back on. The tough times, like the ones we are currently in, define our characters and shape our attitudes. You don't have to do anything I'm saying, but I recommend you to take this time and do some self-reflection. It's completely up to you. But like I said previously, this is a test. It's not a pass-fail sort of test. You can look at it as more of a diagnostic test. Utilize this time to learn about yourself, about your own character and how you respond in times of adversity. The negative experiences that you'll have and will continue to get for a long time shouldn't hinder you from ascending in life. But building up your resilience, should we encounter a similar experience, I want y'all to grow with me. I'm not going to be that Instagram motivator guy, pound this hustler type mentality into your brain, because everyone's definition of success is different. It's not just monetary for some people. But I want y'all to experience as many things as you can. With that in mind, I'm just going to give y'all the lowdown of the creative liberties I'll be taking with this podcast. I was kind of considering using this announcer's voice and talking like this, but then I said to myself that was kind of dumb and not very personable. I'm 19, so I don't want to throw you off and make you wonder, what the hell is this guy on? But moving forward, episodes will start off by me making just a quick recap of current events that are relevant to the topic of discussion that we'll be touching on, and then going ahead and interviewing the guests for most of the episode. I have to say that the following episodes will fall into the 20 to 30 minute range, so just something you can listen to on your commute to work or school, or you just want to sit down, relax, and unwind to something real quickly. I don't think I'm going to make an episode just yet that will approach the 45-minute to an hour mark, unless the guest is somebody that really has a lot to say, or if y'all want the episodes to be that long, of course. I'm currently trying to also come up with more segments that I can integrate that can be more entertaining to listen to. Because I've come to understand that if my target demographic are late teens to individuals in their early 20s, I have to be engaging and provide a proper reason to listen to this rather than listening to music or something. So for today, I think I've overstayed my welcome since I'm not providing another perspective currently on this episode. It's been a real pleasure. And I do have to say, tune in next week as I'm going to go all in about whether college is something we should be investing in or looking into other means of education. I'll leave you with that and have a great one. See you next Sunday at noon.